Welcome to Inspired Nonprofit Leadership, where you'll hear insights and useful strategies, as well as lessons learned from other nonprofit leaders and valuable tips from a variety of experts. Here to help you with the challenges and opportunities you face day after day is your host and nonprofit leadership expert, Sarah Olivieri.
Hello, nonprofit leaders, and welcome to your go-to place for information and inspiration to help you be even more effective. I'm your host, Sarah Olivieri, and you're listening to Inspired Nonprofit Leadership. I have a special guest for you today, Bryce Wolf, who is the Director of Strategic Growth at Unit 4 and is responsible for the delivery of Unit 4's product strategy and for its strategic verticals, including the nonprofit sector, which is why he's here today. His background includes roles in product management, solution architecture, and project management with companies like Oracle, that's a big one, and Certinia. Bryce is passionate about leveraging his expertise to drive innovation, foster collaboration, and deliver measurable results in dynamic global environments. And today we're going to be talking about issues around AI. But before we dive into that, welcome, Bryce. Would you share a little bit about yourself personally, just to round you out as a whole person to our audience?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. So, fun fact, how about that? I had coffee with Taylor Swift.
Ooh, that
hmm
is fun.
Yeah, yeah. So I had coffee with Taylor
How
Swift
did that
and
come about?
it was in 2013 or 14. I don't remember exactly when it was, but I was in Nashville for work, was there often, and there was a coffee shop that was popular for her amongst other artists, and it was a crowded morning. Went in, couldn't find a seat, saw a pretty blonde girl sitting there, asked if she minded if I sat down. So I sat down, we had a conversation. She asked my name, I said Bryce. Asked her, she said Taylor. What do you do? I'm a songwriter. Oh, have you written anything that I might have heard? Maybe. Gives me a couple of songs. Had no idea. And so I had a nice coffee with this girl named Taylor. And then I left and told people at work who I had met and why I was late to work, because I was having a conversation with a girl named Taylor, who is a songwriter. They showed me her picture. They said, "Was this her?" I said, "Yeah." Like, she's real famous. Oh, well, that's cool. Oh, yeah.
I love that story. That would be so me. I don't recognize celebrities, and I'm always afraid I'm going to have an embarrassing to me. I don't know why it shouldn't be embarrassing not to recognize a celebrity, but that really brings me great comfort hearing that story and how well you survived that situation. Well, let's hop into AI, although I'm sure we could do the whole episode about celebrity stories. But, I think nonprofits are excited to use AI, but they're also cautious. And so I'd love for you to start off by talking a little bit about how do nonprofits kind of balance this? Where should they be diving into AI and where should they be careful with AI around sensitive information like donor information or client information?
Yeah. And I mean, AI is a hot topic everywhere, not for profits, commercial sector, public sector. It's in your personal life, it's everywhere. I think we're still a ways off from Skynet, but it is important to, like you said, worry about privacy. So it's all about controlling the data. So I think the first thing whenever AI is being evaluated within an organization is to take a look at the data governance strategy that's in place when you're starting to think about AI. That's going to be the most important thing to consider.
Yeah, I love that. Can you go a little more into, kind of high level bullet points, a good data governance strategy? Like what are you looking to see in there
I
or
mean,
policy? Hmm.
yeah. So I think it's really important to have good quality data to make sure that there is the right privacy protections in place. So there's no protected information that gets entered in, and then making sure that it stays accessible within the organization. So looking at,
Mm.
is it part of an open source type of AI where you're then feeding and training it? Is it a little bit more closed off and not connected to the internet? So those types of things should all be considered for it.
Yeah. And I mean, we should have prefaced this right at Unit 4. You have tools where you are using AI to help make use of data. Would that be a good summary? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So,
the thing with
mhm,
AI too is it's more than just Chat GPT and the conversational AI, that's really brought it to the forefront. It's made
mhm.
it much more at an individual consumer level. But machine learning and things of that nature, those are AI technologies that have been around for a long time now. And Unit 4
Yeah.
is certainly using machine learning as one example of it. So yeah, there's a lot of different types of AI that are used.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I wanted to ask you, I was thinking about, how everyone's using AI as a phrase these days. And we used to talk about the algorithm, and there's still things that are like definitely not AI. They're just like, a code of sequence event, if this, then do that, which I wouldn't call AI, although I think people lump that into AI now. Everything that was an algorithm, everything that was an automation is now AI. So could you just take us through, besides just chat GPT and this, like, let's generate some content, how how do you use AI and how is that potentially useful to people? I'd love to broaden people's minds when they think about how they could incorporate AI and be producing better, more effective work using it.
Yeah, so and that's a great question. And I think it's not as much about the type of AI that you're using, but it's about how you're using it and what it is that you're using it to do. So there's a lot of talk about having the streamlining of work, right? So trying to streamline work. And it's not just about streamlining what exists today. It's really about transforming the way that you work by leveraging AI. So think about time consuming everyday tasks with a finance department, right? So you've got a finance department that needs to handle invoices daily. They need to reconcile accounts. They need to validate expense claims. These are essential, but they're pretty repetitive activities that drain the resources of an individual. So organizations that are using AI powered systems, they can take on these tasks. So as an example, AI can then automatically match an invoice to a purchase order or flag inconsistencies, which then allow finance teams to focus on higher value activities like strategic planning or stakeholder engagement.
It's such a good example. Could you go a little deeper? Like what is the difference these days between an AI's ability to do that and kind of like a more old school tech solution of just kind of like a suggested nudge?
Well, I mean, even a suggested match uses a form of AI for it. So it's the data that you have in the system then gets trained for the AI to be able to start to spot irregularities. So it takes those manual interactions that you've done in the past where an invoice has been rejected and it uses that to synthesize what it should be. And if you have a dollar amount that is inconsistent with a purchase order, the system can then look at that and flag it as something that needs to be investigated.
Yeah, I love that example, about learning, improving, right? It's not just the same, thing running every time. It's getting better as you interact with it, which is so critical, I think, especially when you're processing data, you don't want to or scaling through using machines, you don't want your machines to be kind of like scaling up your mistakes and making them harder to find. It would be good if machines found mistakes, which is exactly, I think, what you're talking about. Where do you see AI being like having the biggest immediate impact for nonprofits today?
You know, I think there's a couple different ways. I think there's that's a really tough one because I can't think of one single way that would have big impact to a nonprofit. But let's talk about internal operations, right? So this is going to be an important part of a not for profit is their internal operations to keep the organization running. So if we're talking about then the automation of different processes in the background to better allocate resources. It's then allowing that organization to free up time to focus driving the outcomes that they want to, which is to focus on their mission that they're trying to
Hmm.
deliver for the people that they're serving.
When you think about how, maybe to kind of go in that a little deeper, and you think about Unit 4's offerings, since you've been involved with project management and product strategy, how has Unit 4 evolved, like adding AI? Like what are the key things, the timeline, if you will, of incorporating AI into different functionalities?
Yeah, so we've actually been using AI for a number of years now. We were, I'd say, a little ahead of our time with a chatbot that we had. The chatbot was called Wanda. It's still there and is constantly being improved and being used. But it's a conversational AI, not in the chat GPT sense, but it allows the system to take action based on the inputs that are received.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. So a chat bot, and then what was kind of the next thing that evolved?
And then from there, it's about being able to action what comes in. So you can approve timesheets with it. You can approve expense reports. You can approve invoices. You can flag an invoice to be reviewed. There's so much that you can do with even this early level of chatbot that now there's so much more that's just automated in the system.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. And I think that level of approving. Kind of back to my first question, some people might be going like, "Oh my god, like a computer is going to approve it. Like, don't we need to double check it? Is that secure enough?" I'll put in my 2 cents and then I'll let you go deep. My 2 cents is, I see a lot of human error in approving stuff. So I think, I'll let you be the expert on the AI, but I'll have to say on the human side of things, humans make mistakes. So I wouldn't say that your current system, if you have only human focused tools, it may not be as infallible as it feels. But what do you say to someone who's, being like, I'm not sure how can we trust it if it's approving things?
I mean, the best way to do it is trust but verify. So as you're going through and the invoices are say they're approved, then you can go through and you can make sure that everything is correct. Make sure that okay, this all matches up and just do an audit on the approval and make sure that everything looks good. And then as it does, that trust builds and then the time is truly saved and focus is able to be shifted to important activities. And the AI is not going to approve something that has an inconsistency in it. It will flag the inconsistency for the individual to review it. It's not going to replace the person. It's going to free up their time and mental bandwidth to focus on activities that really matter to the organization.
Yeah, I think that's a good example and a meaningful point I've noticed in my own use with AI. When I create something, it's really then hard to review it. But as kind of the primary thought leader, it's always been a conundrum. I do need to review it, right? That's important. They're my ideas. And now that I kind of have this 3-step system where I create something, usually verbally through video, and then AI chops it up and turns it into different formats. So it was originally my words, and then I review the outputs, and I'm actually able to review and spend more time fine tuning than in the past because one, I have the time and energy because I didn't have to create it. And two, I'm just a better reviewer of quote somebody else's work, right? The AI's work, because I'm not as deep in it, because I didn't just create it. It's just like a designer. I always designers have tell people like a graphic designer, you got to check the spelling, right? Because when you're in there with the letters, like all of a sudden the spelling is like invisible potentially. So I think that's a really good point about, the layers deep, the level of accountability that AI allows us to have is a significant addition. What are your recommendations for nonprofits who want to keep up with AI? I'm thinking a little bit about when I was starting in the nonprofit world many, many years ago. I was the young person who knew how to not just use a computer quote, but like I knew how to use email. I knew how to use Microsoft Word and Excel. And these were tools that people who'd been in the space longer, who were much older than I was, we're struggling to adapt to. And here we have AIs coming really fast. How do we keep up with this? How do we bring our teams along? How do we, add something new to our plate when we have an already full plate? How do we deal with keeping up with AI information, know-how? What skills do we need to keep up with?
Yeah, I mean, this is where education is critical. I'm a big fan of continuing education and never stop learning. And I can assume that you are with all of the books behind you there, unless those are just for show,
Absolutely.
but I don't think that they are. E-
Books.
Even though I don't have books behind me, I do enjoy reading on occasion more than just the Sunday funnies. But no, I think that really continuing the education and treating it as something new and exciting to learn about, I think that's the best way to do it. There's all sorts of classes that are offered. I know that LinkedIn Learning has some, and there's even more resources that are out there, many of which are free, which give you some insight with how to best use it. I know that there's some courses out there for conversational AI, for how to ask better questions to get the most out of the conversational AI. Because AI is so much, whether it's from an individual consumer level or for an organization with financial data, you get out what you put in. And so it's really
That's right.
important to have that mindset of don't stop learning, try and get more out of it and make it work for you.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I would, for my clients where we talk a lot about, how do you have the capacity to do things? And so many nonprofits are understaffed and overworked. And as we get out of that, part of the process I teach organizations is generally monitor your staff's time that is being used up to their total available work time. And rather than operate where everyone's like operating at 110% of their total available work time, you should really, as you start to hit roughly like 80% of available work time being used, that's when you need to think about, you always want to keep 20% buffer for pretty much everybody. And you can use that 20% to upskill, right? To spend some time learning. You can use
Mhm.
that 20% to hire, onboard a new person, right? Train somebody new. You can use that 20% to like streamline, start using AI, streamline how you work, bring your regular workload back to, like 60%. And then you can come back up to 80% as you add things on top. And where I see organizations really getting stuck is when they're operating at 100% or higher than 100% of their true availability, they then become stuck and their growth stops. They become stagnant because they can't improve, they can't streamline, they can't really hire and onboard new people because they're not available to do that. So that's kind of my 2 cents for everybody in thinking about, AI is a really good example. If you save some time, you could learn how to use AI better or for the first time and then bring your whole workload down. It's a great tool for streamlining and improving and creating more availability.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. So I want to talk about data for a minute because I think AI should be playing an increasing role in helping us review our data. I think nonprofits have been pushed, data, 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 data. Some of them have done it, some of them haven't, but still, I think especially like in the human services space, there's a lot of data collection and maybe reports that don't mean so much. And I'm always pushing for let's make the data meaningful. Let's actually look at it. Let's actually use it. Some fewer numbers are maybe often better, right? When our brain looks at like, 50 different numbers, we're like, but if our brain looks at like 5 numbers, we can usually take it in a little better. What are your thoughts on AI's role with making data meaningful and actionable for nonprofits?
I mean, again, so much of this is you get out what you put in. So I think that if you have good data in the system, there's a lot that you can get out to be able to to identify trends, to identify perhaps a seasonality in donations that hadn't been noticed before. Or let's say that there are funds that have been unused. Like that would be absolutely terrible if there are funds that are going to expire and you need to use them. That it would be horrible to waste that, to have that go to waste there. So it's about making that data work for you to and use it to be able to identify trends, to identify the white space even for where you can improve as an organization.
Yeah, going back to keeping up with learning how to use AI, what do you see like the younger generation coming in? Are they at an advantage? Have they, are they picking up AI sooner, or is AI so new that everybody who's keeping up with tech is kind of on a level playing field?
I think it goes to the willingness. So I think it really goes to the willingness of the individual to pick it up. I don't think that it's necessarily going to be easier for the younger generation to pick it up any more than it is somebody who is nearing the end of their career. It's about the time that you invest into it. It's not like you mentioned Microsoft Word and all of the online things before, and how there was a generational advantage that you had for using that, I'm assuming through school, to be
Yep.
able to put yourself in a position when you entered the workforce to be able to do that. Chat GPT, as an example, conversational AI and that consumer level AI is so new, and with the wireless tech enabled world that we live in and tech infused world, constantly having the line blurred between the consumer side and the business side, I think all generations are set up for success to be able to use it. Obviously, if you have somebody who doesn't really use a computer, doesn't really use email, doesn't use that, they will have a steeper learning curve. But I don't think there's
Sure.
anything that the newer generation will have over the older generation, except for perhaps time and willingness to differentiate themselves. So if that's
Hmm.
something that the younger generation, as they start off, there's a lot that they have to learn, a lot that they have to take on, but the responsibility is typically a little bit lower. So as the responsibility is a little bit lower, there's a little bit more time to be able to dedicate to learning those types of things and really being able to upskill there. So that's something that with that time, with the lower level of responsibility, that could set them up for success to really get an edge there and be able to add value to the organization really quickly. And that's fantastic to be able to do that. So I think that would be great to see.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's really opportunity for anybody who's open to it, to spending some time to learn it. As you share that, I was thinking, anecdotally, I've found learning how to use AI well and getting good results using AI has actually been a much lower learning curve than past tech advances because it's not as sensitive. Like I remember I used to build websites, and the first time I started using a PHP driven website tool, and for, code people, just, if you're not into code, just close your ears for a second. But the point is there were previously HTML sites, and then they started these tools that were built on something called PHP. And to know in an HTML site, if you changed a letter, you might change something visually on a page. But my first experience with PHP is I changed one letter and I took the entire website down. I was like, oh my, like it was complicated. It was amazing. It could do really cool things, but it was very, very sensitive to mistakes. One teeny change and you could break the whole thing if it was not the right thing. AI isn't like that. AI doesn't seem so sensitive. You can it's hard to mess up, and it's pretty good at figuring out, by its own nature of being something that so much can take in and contextualize stuff. Do you agree
And
with that? Do you feel
I
like this is
do.
is there hope?
It's so much like as you were talking about that, I was remembering my first HTML website that I built, not great. And then it's so funny to think of how difficult things were then versus how
Yeah.
easy it is now. And so much of that, though, is due to the individuals that have all of the skill, have all of the knowledge in building those tools. I mean, if you look
Yeah.
at Google as an example, too, when you used to Google something or search for something, you might go to askjeeves.com or Yahoo, rest in peace, or Google to search for something. And if you wanted to be able to search for something and join two ideas together, you had to type a plus sign or
Yeah.
in all caps
Yes.
and. You don't have to do any of that anymore. So much of that is because the organizations like Google, Unit 4 as well, with the AI that we have, it's about the knowledge within those organizations to be able to craft that AI to make it easier to use and much more user friendly than the old HTML websites.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Well, as we wrap up, I'd love for you to tell us a little more about Unit 4, who it's for, how it can help nonprofits, and the best way for folks to get in touch with you or with Unit 4 if they're interested in that.
Yeah, so Unit 4 is the leading ERP solution provider for not-for-profit organizations. So we help not-for-profits globally, US, Europe, worldwide. We've got not-for-profits really represented all over. I'm trying to think of the major countries that we don't have with it. And we have a lot of not-for-profits that we're working with who are doing good all over the world. And we want to enable them to focus on their mission, which is serving the people that they see the need within their communities, within their areas of expertise. So we want to provide solutions for them to be able to allow them to focus on their primary mission because their success is our success. And then to get in touch,
Wonderful. Yep.
I would visit unit4.com to be able to learn a little bit more about us and what we offer. And then from there, there's a way to reach out to learn more information about us.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Bryce, for being here today. And thank you out there for listening, but also for all that you do to make your communities better. This podcast is here to assist people like you, executive directors, board members, and other nonprofit leaders. And you can help your colleagues, your fellow nonprofit leaders, find this podcast by leaving a review. It helps the algorithms dish it up to other folks who might benefit from this information. And speaking of information to benefit from, in addition to the podcast, we now have the Inspired Nonprofit Leadership newsletter where I send you bite-sized actionable tips once a week that you can implement right away at your organization and stay on top of your leadership game. And you can access that by going to inspirednonprofitleadership.com/sign up. In the meantime, take care of yourself, take time for self-care. Take a few minutes to learn something new, maybe test out some AI you haven't tried yet, or experiment for a moment, even if it is just with ChatGPT. And be sure to listen to the next episode of Inspired Nonprofit Leadership. Until then, all the best.
You've been listening to Inspired Nonprofit Leadership. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode or the bonus episodes. And while you're at it, please leave a rating and review and be sure to share with your friends and colleagues. Tune in every week for more useful insights and wisdom on nonprofit leadership. Thanks so much for all you do for the communities you serve. Until next time, all the best.